Welcome to the Asia Tech Podcast. This is Blockchain Asia, and we're back again.
We're back. Happy New Year.
For those who didn't know, that we had a little bit of a computer glitch, but now it's working.
Yep.
And Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
First recording of the year of 2019.
2019.
Yeah,
First one. Good to be back in the studio.
Time flies. So I'm Gustavo Liu, and I'm back with my co-host, Michelle Wonderland. So happy to be back again.
I know. I was saying before when we were recording that I had separation anxiety. I was like, yay.
Well,
so used to seeing you all the time.
And we're going to be doing a monthly recording going forward.
Yep.
So for those of you who've been listening and expecting us to come up every week, now it's every month. The anticipation is going to be longer. Today we have a very special guest, Edgar Seah. He does a lot of work with Hashgraph, which is a topic that is extremely interesting. And it's something that I've been fascinated about, wanting to learn more, especially when they talk about the sort of inefficiencies of blockchain. I see it more as like the mutated cousin of blockchain. This is the Hashgraph. We played this joke twice already, so don't be surprised if we're not laughing.
There's no like live feedback, like laugh track. You know?
Yeah, I know, right?
That's what we need.
But Edgar, welcome. And we were just... we're offline. We got to know you a little bit better. You've essentially done a lot of work, not just in Singapore but other parts of the world. Do you want to share with us a little bit about your work in Ghana?
Yeah, sure. Well, first of all, thanks Gus and Michelle for having me here. I was in Ghana from 2012 to 2014. So I was initially had gone there for a short visit, ended up visiting an orphanage, was very touched by what the orphanage did, and went back to Ghana initially the second time for 3 months to build up a water company where the profits would get donated to the orphanage. And when I was there, I ran into a former colleague who I used to work with in Merrill Lynch in New York, and who's Ghanaian. And we had this idea for a social enterprise, a leadership development program for young Africans to build and train socially conscious leaders. And I was very inspired by the idea, and so I decided to stay on in Ghana and build out the organization. So I was there from 2012 to 2014, got the organization financially sustainable, and hired a full-time CEO to take over from me in 2014, and she's been doing a great job growing the organization ever since.
And then you went off. Sorry.
I was just going to say, now, how do you go from, working in banking, working in finance and, and then going to Ghana? Like, how does that, how did you come to that point?
Of
and
all
then you
places.
stayed,
Yep.
so it, yeah.
Yeah, I, the way I think about life, I just try to let things come to me, and I do things that interest me at that point in time.
Free spirit.
Very much so. And so when truth is, when I started my career in finance, I never saw finance as a long-term career. It was always a stepping stone. And in fact, when I was in college, and we had talked about this a little bit, I did this program called Semester at Sea, and we went to a lot of developing countries, and that was my first time, my first exposure to how people live in many parts of the world. It's when you grow up in Singapore and you go to college in the U.S., you live this sheltered life, but when you start to travel and you get to see how people live all over the world, and that was the first time I realized that, there were a lot of people that lived in much poorer and more difficult environments than I grew up in, and it hit me quite hard. I certainly felt that I was very lucky to have to be born in Singapore and have the opportunities I had. So that inspired me to want to do something in the nonprofit world at some point in my life. So
when we grow up in such a comfortable lifestyle, right, when everything is sort of provided and done. I think that mentality of social impact, it doesn't really, we don't get that realization until we go to other parts of the world and we see that hardship. I mean, that is tough. Africa, of all places, right? And then you go India, you have a lot of parts of the world that are extremely tough. And that is some of the things that I think more Singaporeans should do. They should go out of Singapore and visit more countries.
Yeah, I certainly encourage that. Yeah, and so, and back to your question about finance, I saw finance as a stepping stone, believe it or not, into the nonprofit world. I saw it as a place where I could learn as much as I could, and I could save up money, and so that I had the freedom as well as the knowledge to do things in the nonprofit world after that.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Fantastic.
And you stayed for 2 years.
What, in finance?
No, stayed in
Ghana.
Ghana. Yeah.
Yes, in Ghana I stayed for 2 years.
Yeah.
And then you traveled to Latin America. You were sharing. with us?
I did. So after I quit my job at Merrill Lynch in 2010, I spent about 2 years or so traveling around, and so I ended up spending quite a lot of time in Latin America.
Yeah, my hometown,
Yeah.
Foz do Iguaçu.
Yeah, that's right.
I think we went to Asunción as well, which is the capital of Paraguay.
Yep.
Is initially where I spent actually quite a good earlier years over there. It was really tough during the sort of 80s, because that was when Stroessner was sort of losing power, and it was a transition period, and there was a lot of war during that time. That was the time when I spent there.
No, I can't imagine. No, I can't imagine how difficult it must have been. But yeah.
And how did you get exposure to blockchain? Tell us a little bit about how you got involved to that.
Sure. Yeah. So I have been an investor and advisor to early stage tech companies since 2012, and have been looking very closely at the blockchain space for the last 3 years or so. I've always been very excited about the potential of the space, but saw a lot of limitations with the technologies at that point. Right?
So hang on, take one step back, right? You were a bond trader.
Yeah.
And you invested in startup technology.
That's right.
That is rare, because bond traders generally are more sort of risk averse. The nature of bond, they understand bonds, right? And now you're not only did you didn't go on investing on this exchange stock market, but you went to the highest risk appetite, which is startup world.
Yeah, maybe, but I think it just came out of interest from wanting to learn about what's next and what's what our future looks like. And I was fortunate to meet a lot of tech entrepreneurs that were doing very interesting things. Okay. So that's how my journey as an investor got started.
That's amazing. Yeah. I think more people should learn from this, because I mean, if you look at the nature of debt and equity, right, and then you get the other dimension, which is still equity, but then you get these tiny little valuations that it's more of an art than a science. And the fact that you were exposed to across this entire region. And I also think that because we look at entrepreneurs and their ability to take risk, and the fact that you traveled around, you dropped everything, and you went on to look to solve problems, real problems around the world. That is in essence what it takes to be an entrepreneur.
Yeah. And
so blockchain, you mentioned that you were doing, was it trading first, or you were studying?
Yeah, no, I think my early part of the journey was really just out of interest, and so I was just doing a lot of reading and learning about, at that point it was primarily Bitcoin and proof of work blockchain, and then over time just got a little bit more involved in investing. And like I said earlier, I was always very excited about the potential for the space and the ability to move to more decentralized models. And in June of 2017, a friend of mine introduced me to the Hashgraph technical white paper.
Yeah. Was that just out of curiosity? Is that out of like disappointment for what blockchain wasn't able to achieve, or is it was there any form of like, or was it purely like, okay, let's compare these two technologies and see which one is more effective?
Yeah. Well, when I, for me at that point I was just learning and I was just trying to read as much as I could. But when I read the Hashgraph technical white paper, I was blown away by what Dr. Lehman Baird, our chief scientist and co-founder of Hedera Hashgraph, had invented with the Hashgraph consensus algorithm. It literally solves all the limitations of existing blockchain technology.
And see, so this is where I come in because I don't know about Hashgraph, and so I know that we were talking about that. It's great to be able to have this explanation, like where do you find that blockchain falls short, because like I look at blockchain and I think, oh yeah, it can solve everything. But I mean, really, there are things that, putting things on that, using the technology can't. But what can Hashgraph do? How, how does this all work?
Sure. Well, I can. Let's start with the properties of Hashgraph and
explain to us like a 3-year-old.
Yeah, exactly, because that's like where I'm coming from. Yeah.
Well, I also I think it's very interesting every time you hear how it is, right? And essentially the inefficiencies of blockchain was what Hash was able to address. And so explain to us we are 3-year-old and how do we go about understanding Hashgraph?
Well, I will do my best. Well, let's start with the properties of Hashgraph. So Hashgraph is a consensus algorithm, just like proof of work blockchain is a consensus algorithm. And it's what a consensus algorithm is trying to achieve is to get a group of people that may not know each other and may not trust each other.
Yeah.
The Byzantine dilemma, right?
That's correct. So this group of people that may not know each other, may not trust each other, to come to an agreement on typically a set of, to come to an agreement on something, right? And we usually to come to an agreement on the transactions that have occurred as well as the order of the transactions that have occurred. And let's use proof of work blockchain as a starting point. What Satoshi Nakamoto had invented with proof of work blockchain, and Bitcoin being the most famous application of this technology, is he allowed for the first time for people that don't know each other to come to an agreement on something, right? He created a decentralized ledger. And so prior to that, all the other models required everyone to...
like a middle party or somebody to validate it.
Yeah, either a centralized party or prior consensus mechanisms required you to know everybody else in the network.
Yeah, okay.
And what Satoshi Nakamoto's breakthrough was that you don't have to know, and you don't have to trust the people in the network.
Yep.
You just need to trust the math behind how all this works. And so proof of work blockchain, and in a simplified explanation, is there are a group of what we call miners that solve this cryptographic puzzle.
They essentially validate everything that keeps getting, and they kind of go on this chase to validate every single step that keeps happening on the blockchain.
Yeah, that's right. So the miners validate the transactions, but how do you get them to decide on the order of the transactions?
Yeah.
And the way that system works is all the miners compete to solve a cryptographic puzzle. Think of it like a Sudoku puzzle.
I was gonna say that sounds awesome. We're gonna do this.
Something you do on the train or in the toilet.
Yeah, that's right. And the miner that solves the puzzle first wins the right to publish the next block.
Okay.
So
and they earn the gas in this exchange.
They earn the reward.
Yeah.
And so that's how that system decides the order of the transactions. It first decides who's the miner, and then the miner is the one that publishes the block and decides which transactions goes into that block. Now, Hashgraph. Well, I'll talk about the properties of a proof of work blockchain first. It's it's slow relative to.
It used to take weeks.
Well,
and then it's done like days and
not-
then hours.
Yeah. So basically, it's Bitcoin proof of work blockchain does 5 transactions per second, and it uses up a lot of energy.
Yep.
Right.
Very
a lot of
inefficient.
electricity, and you also never achieve 100% certainty.
Yep.
On the transactions, because it's a chain of blocks, but the chain can split into 2.
A fork.
Right, can fork, and there are soft forks and hard forks. But
Like what happened to Bitcoin and Ethereum, the Ethereum tokens.
yeah, that's right. So both
Yeah.
platforms have experienced hard forks.
Yeah.
And because forks can exist, a transaction is only considered confirmed by the community if multiple blocks have been published. Then you can confirm a block that occurred, maybe 6 blocks ago or 20 blocks ago, right? And then the transaction in that block from 20 blocks ago can be considered confirmed by the community. But you're never hitting 100% certainty of a transaction.
Yeah.
Now,
Because the system wasn't designed to get 100% certainty to begin with. It's as long as you get 51%, that would be okay, right?
yeah,
But
well,
more than 51%.
No, actually, that's
Oh, is it,
that's a different
okay,
thing.
it's a different-
Yeah,
okay.
you're talking about the hashing power, but
Okay.
we won't go into that
Okay.
at this point. Although we can if you want to.
No. Let's get to where.
Yeah.
hashtag.
So
I'm trying to get my mind around so far, what you're saying.
right.
I'm like, all right.
So now Hashgraph is a consensus algorithm that can hit over 100,000 transactions per second with 100% certainty on the transactions. And very importantly, it achieves the highest level of security possible in distributed consensus. So there's a standard of security in distributed consensus called asynchronous Byzantine fault tolerance, or ABFT. We didn't invent this. This has been around in computer science for 30 years. And for decades, no one thought it was possible to create a consensus algorithm that achieved ABFT but was scalable.
Yep.
And Lehman spent years of his life working on this and had a breakthrough in 2015 with the invention of the Hashgraph consensus algorithm.
Cool.
Yep.
And so at what stage is it at? Because last I heard, and that was been a while, right? 'Cause so all this while we've been focusing on blockchain a lot. What sort of applications, or is there still sort of you guys are still collaborating, trying to find to actually get it into actual usage, or what stage is there at this moment?
Yeah, that's a great question. So maybe I'll start a little bit with the timeline up until now. So Lehman started working on this problem in 2012. Hashgraph was invented in 2015.
Yep.
Prior to last year in 2017, prior to that, Hashgraph has only been used in private permission use cases by enterprise clients.
Okay.
And in March of 2017, we announced Hedera Hashgraph,
Yep.
which is the public ledger
Okay.
built on top of the Hashgraph consensus algorithm. And the network went live at the end of August 2000. I'm sorry. We announced Hedera in March of 2018.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
and then the network went live in August 2018, and we spent the first few months after the network went live doing internal testing. In December, we opened up the network for community testing, and different groups of developers have had early access to the network so that they can start building applications.
So it's a platform essentially for people.
That's right. So it's Hedera Hashgraph is a network and a platform for developers to build distributed applications on top of.
Dude, so that's, I mean, the way that you're describing it, and you have this platform. I mean, why would anybody, use blockchain? That's, I'm playing the devil, because obviously I'm an evangelist on, what blockchain technology can do, but I don't even know, I might know, a certain amount. But here's this, and the transactions are quicker, more precise.
Yep.
But does it have to be, that's the question I will ask myself as well, like, does it always have to be one or the other? Or what is the intention? Like, is it to get blockchain developers to switch over to Hashgraph? Is that, or is it to like simultaneously explore both and see which one works?
The intention. Let's start with Lehman's intention. Lehman's vision is to build the trust layer of the internet, where we no longer have to have centralizized organizations. Monetize our information.
Claims to want to do, right?
Right.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
So that's right. And let me be clear. And so it also depends on what do you mean by blockchain. Now, blockchain can refer to proof of work blockchain.
Yep.
Right. The consensus algorithm, but many people also use blockchain to mean the entire distributed ledger technology ecosystem.
Okay. Yeah.
Right. And Hashgraph is a DLT, is a distributed ledger technology, and it's a consensus algorithm, just like proof of work blockchain is a consensus algorithm. It does everything that proof of work blockchain does, and more. It introduces, so it's faster, it's more secure. It also introduces for the first time the concept of fairness.
Okay.
And by that, I mean that there's no member of the community that can manipulate the order of the transactions that enter into the ledger.
But if you think about blockchain and you can't change it, or it's technically immutable. Yeah.
Yep.
So isn't that the same, or is it?
Yep, that's right.
Okay.
Yep.
But then you have this extra, it's like blockchain tech for this, like on speed.
Yes.
Okay.
So do you see Hashgraph as a completely different technology from the actual what is understood as blockchain now, or is it more blockchain on steroids?
Well, that also depends on what do you mean when you say blockchain. Do you mean the entire?
I mean, all the concepts that they're talking about, the trust, the trustless, the zero proof, and all of that, and. What about all the research that Ethereum Foundation and all of this foundation researchers and scientists have poured their heart and soul and time onto building a better sort of technology on top of the blockchain, and now you come and say, well, Hashgraph is faster and better, like abandon that. Or we're talking about, hey, you know what, like these are collectively kind of in the same kind of stuff, and you just have to.
Yes. So collectively, we are very much a part of the entire ecosystem.
Yeah.
There are applications that can run on the other platforms. They will also be able to run on our platform. We'll just be faster and more secure. And and so we certainly view ourselves as the cutting edge of the ecosystem.
Yep.
Both from a technology standpoint and also how we're putting together the governance for our platform. And I think we're in this with everybody else to really just try to move this thing forward.
I was going to say, I have a question. So like are they compatible, or is it one or the other? Can you build on top of, so you have a wider variety of options to use, although...
Or is it a different language? or do coders have to relearn a whole new the new language?
Yeah. So actually, one of the benefits of Hedera Hashgraph is that developers, you don't have to learn a brand new programming language. If you're familiar with Java, if you're familiar with Golang, whatever language you're familiar with, you'll be able to build on top of our platform.
Cool.
Yeah.
This brings actually very it actually kind of creates a segment into the articles that you wanted to talk about, right? And the article you submitted, not only one, but you submitted two, and both of them are actually extremely important because both of these articles are topics that we spoke about with other guests previously.
In 2018.
In 2018, about how ICOs and the situations of the sort of the winter of what the ICO world is experiencing. And so the topic of this one is saying that goodbye to the blockchain romantics, right? And that actually goes to what you were saying on the aspect of, is this blockchain as what we know today as decentralized as it appears to be? Because as soon as somebody changes the code or changes the rules of the game, everybody have to change the direction towards that. And suddenly what they were working on initially was suddenly, I wouldn't say useless, but it wouldn't be as applicable anymore. So can you talk to us a little bit about this?
Yeah, if you look at what blockchain has been or used for so far, most companies have just used it as a fundraising mechanism, right?
Yeah,
or the crypto purposes, right?
Yeah, exactly. To raise funding, to do an ICO. And now that the way we view it, now that the market has come down so much, that has we think been beneficial for the entire ecosystem, because now we can just focus on building.
It weeds out all the players.
It weeds out all the players, and unfortunately. There have been a lot of scams in the space as well, and we're glad to see the industry move away from that.
Well, I would say it's fortunately, right? I mean, it's unfortunate to the people that got scammed, but if you look at the 2007 financial crisis, the sort of the great financial crisis, the whole purpose of making the financial system stronger and more resilient to certain shocks was because people, sadly, had to be sacrificed due to the subprime crisis. And then people understood that, there is a flaw, right? Like banks weren't supposed to be that creative, and we suddenly allowed them to be creative. And the same thing I would say with blockchain. With the crypto space, maybe the technology, although back then Satoshi or Vitalik, they've written about it, about how this new sort of utopia economy, but the crypto space was actually what created a lot of fraud. And if it wasn't because of that, I think today our systems wouldn't be so well positioned. I think we're getting there. It's getting slightly better step at a time. And they are inevitable, those first sort of ships that have to be sacrificed.
Yeah, I mean, it's very similar to, I would equate it more to the tech bubble boom in the late 90s, where there was everyone was throwing a lot of money into any
internet company,
anything that was .com, right? And but and then there was a big crash. But during that crash, there were a lot of meaningful businesses that were built, and a lot of infrastructure that was laid to see a lot of the advancements that we have today.
And that leads to the second article that you talked about, which is the crypto winter wasn't the real story of 2018, and it won't be for 2019 either, which is essentially what you said about, and I like how they are connected, right? Because the one connecting, sort of, if you look at it from a Venn diagram perspective, the common factor is that people talk about how blockchain is not regulated, but actually it's not true. blockchain
by everybody or by no central person. It's.
I would say governments are more entrepreneurial than most people think.
Yeah, but I'm saying not regulated by like a government, but because you have everything kind of out there. So, but one part fails somebody.
But what I mean is that a lot of people are saying like, well, governments are against blockchain, but that is not true. The reason why they're regulated is because they want blockchain to happen. That's the whole point. Otherwise, they would just tell it's a scam and we just push it out as opposed to regulating it. I think the concept of regulation is what most people don't fully understand. And I think we talked a couple of times before was about how entrepreneurial governments are. And in actual fact, Singapore government is very entrepreneurial and is very supportive of blockchain, right? Mm-hmm. Is that what you experience here in Singapore?
Yeah. I run the Asia Pacific region for the company. I'm responsible for Japan all the way down to Australia, and there's a reason why I'm here in Singapore, because it's the government has really done a nice job in supporting this technology and building the ecosystem.
Yeah. And it isn't just even in this, it's also, I was just reading in Straits Times today that, Singapore is now set up to be the AI hub, where they're, so it's these other that you can start to overlay technologies and put practical applications on them, which is exciting.
And it's all about platforms, right? Gone are the days where people are just talking about use this case, and that is the only thing that we will be looking at, and let's fund all that. Yeah. Now it's about let's build that foundation, and what can we allow everybody else to come and contribute. And that is essentially what you are doing for Hashgraph, isn't it? You want more developers to come in and explore applications for usage.
That's right. Yeah. And I think I think earlier on you had asked me about applications that are building on our platform. So we have over 100 different applications that have committed to building on our platform.
Wow.
So maybe just to go back to the timeline, we're in testing phase at the moment, but we're expecting that the network will be open up to the public in March or April, so in about a couple of months.
When you say open up to the public, do you mean like third-party developers, or do you mean the actual public?
To developers. So now, for them to participate in our testing phase, they have to come talk to us, or they have to register and fill out some things, and
so it's centralized because they have to come and talk to you.
It's in beta, man. It's in beta.
I'm just being silly,
but decentralization is very much a path, not something that happens on day one. But at open access, all developers, they will no longer have to talk to us. They can just start building.
Is it easy though? I mean, I think about.
Well, I'm not a developer, but the developers that I've spoken to have said it's actually very easy to build on our platform, much easier than other platforms that they've experienced.
Oh,
yeah,
nice.
Awesome. So what is the some of the applications that you've seen being built on that's sort of being explored on Hashgraph? This is the actual user cases. Are we talking about? I guess payment and transactions. There's one system that blockchain has kind of been very well known for. Would Hashgraph have a different type of? And then we talk about like smart contracts, right?
Yep.
And that's another way of like sort of transferring data onto. So what sort of application are we talking about?
Well, really a very wide range of applications, but I can certainly highlight a few. So Satara is a pharmaceutical company. So I think they were sold for close to $800 million 2 years ago. And they are building an application to track supply chain of their drugs on the Hedera Hashgraph platform. You have another company called Almond that is using our platform to track also the food supply chain.
Okay.
We have another company that is building or tokenizing real estate and using our technology to do that. So we actually have a wide range, and we have some big enterprises. Some we haven't made it publicly known yet, but we will soon over the next month or so. some big enterprises that are launching applications on our platform as well.
So when
these will be big multinational corporations.
When you were talking about that, you could have your application be relative, because all I can think of is I draw that parallel to blockchain and how, food, tech, safety, medical, all of this. I can't help but it's difficult for me to separate, except for the benefits of what the 3 benefits, and those are really huge benefits that you mentioned about, having the transactions be faster, like exponentially faster, but I'm trying to wrap my head around it, because obviously if I was building on the platform, I would probably choose yours, because it just seems like much more beneficial.
Sure.
But so what does your platform solve more so besides the things? Does it solve more than, let's say, blockchain technology? I know you mentioned trust, and that's interesting. But do you think? And here's the second question: do you think that governments might adopt, Hashgraph instead? Do you think that's a future?
Yes, absolutely. So I'll touch on your first question. So maybe I can just clarify. So the first question was around what does Hashgraph solve that blockchain doesn't?
Yes.
Yeah.
Speed, right? I think that's one of the things.
Yeah. So maybe to take a step back. So Hashgraph is a consensus algorithm, just like blockchain is a consensus algorithm.
Yeah.
So and it's at the bottom layer of the tech stack. So anything that's built on top of it doesn't, other than the properties that the consensus algorithm provides, and speed and security being 2 important ones, it doesn't really care as much, because all the consensus algorithms do exactly the same thing. They just order the transactions a certain way, and in a trustless manner, right?
Okay.
Where you don't need to know all the other parties in the network. So, so Hashgraph, what Hashgraph can do, so Hashgraph does everything that blockchain can do, but it introduces new sets of applications and use cases that are just not possible on existing blockchain technology.
Can I also attempt to reply that question in the manner that let's look at a traditional car, right? Okay. A lot of the problem where a car breaks down, it has to do with the engine and how it gets overheated and all of that. And so you've got people like Elon Musk that suddenly came here and then say, and a lot of car companies say, how do we make the engine better? How do we cool it down? And then they were like, well, Elon Musk was like, why do we even need an engine? Let's get rid of the engine and replace it with battery. And that was essentially the way I see how blockchain, because you've got all these other companies like Ethereum and all the other like EOS and all of that, trying to say, how do we do the current what we have right now and make it better? And let's look at technologies like Polkadot or all these other technologies, like how to make it faster and more trustworthy. But then people from the group of Hashgraph essentially came in and said like, well, why do we even need that? Like, why don't we just like go and build this completely different? And that is the way I see it.
That's right. So Lehman's approach is completely different from blockchain, but it does the same things.
Okay.
Just faster, more secure, and also introduces for the first time the concept of fairness. Yeah. Right. Where no one can manipulate the order of the transactions that enter into the
And
ledger.
I think there will be more and more of this going forward. I mean, I guess Hashgraph will be the one that sort of explore that different divergence of should we always just keep trying to find solution on Ethereum, on Bitcoin, and all of this technology? Because Bitcoin was built on top of, like, it was Bitcoin version 1, right, the blockchain one, and then blockchain version 2 was Ethereum, and then you go for all the other versions. And Hashgraph just went like, we don't need any of this. It's just completely built something completely different.
And so the second part is government adoption.
Right. We have been speaking to government entities all across Asia and all across the world. So they're certainly looking at our technology, looking very closely at our technology. As we all know, sometimes takes a little bit longer for governments to adopt and implement.
And there is a
but-
reason why a lot of sort of blockchain adopters has decided to build on top of blockchain, because the education process, especially with government regulator, a lot of other sort of new researchers come in, you wouldn't have to educate an entirely new system. And I can see the challenges sort of climbing Mount Everest all over again and get them to understand. And do you think, do you experience a lot of reluctances? And people are just saying, why don't we just, why do we even need to look at Hashgraph?
From government?
From government or even developers, or even, you know, as across, let's say Asia, how are they receiving it?
Well, certainly in Asia, there's a lot of excitement from, in this space, both from startups to enterprises to governments. I think it's clear to everyone that this is going to be a meaningful part of our lives in the future. There's still a lot of uncertainty as to how we get there and what that really looks like. But yeah, there's a lot of attention.
I feel like I just figured out blockchain. And then now it's like Hashgraph.
Well, that's exactly why I was like, so, tell me like I'm 5. Wait, I think I just figured out blockchain.
But you explained it beautifully, and I think that was where it got us to understand, because when I was listening to podcast recordings before coming out from California and New York, and they were already mentioning hash graphs, but it was very much on the sort of reference of what was being explored. And I think they were onboarding people. At the time when I was listening was about 2 years ago, and they were just like the second person just onboarded onto like, working together on this technology. And now it looks like they have you are the head of Asia Pacific. So that is quite a big sort of growth there in this space.
Yeah, no, we've certainly grown a lot over the last 2 years. So I joined the company about a year and a half ago, and I was employee number 5 or so. And we're 60 people in the company now.
Wow. Throughout the world?
Throughout the world,
Yeah.
yes.
So can I understand, like, did the company raise funds?
We did, yeah.
Okay.
So we raised $124 million last year.
How was it raised? Was it did you guys use crypto? Yeah. How did you raise
You
funds?
built your own platform?
Using blockchain?
Yeah, so
Okay.
we did it via a token sale.
Okay.
Blockchain, was it a Hashgraph token sale? Was it blockchain?
Yeah, I mean, if you want to dive into the more specifics, it's in the form of a SAFT, a Simple Agreement for Future Tokens.
Okay.
And yeah, so the way that works at a high level is just a legal agreement.
Yeah.
It's a contract, just like if someone wanted to invest in your company. And
safe agreement.
a safe agreement.
Yeah.
Same thing. And then at some point when tokens are exist and are created, then the investors will receive the tokens at some point in the future.
Interesting.
Yep.
Did you earn in tokens, or do you earn in fiat?
Yeah.
I mean, it's always that dilemma, right? Like when you raise in tokens, then the tokens kind of fallen. And I actually wonder, do people still sort of receive? Are the developers happy to receive token payments?
It really depends on who you are and your risk appetite. But yes, I mean, everyone in our company gets a portion of the compensation in fiat and a portion in tokens.
That's cool. Yeah.
I mean, you don't know the value of the tokens until when things start to pick up. It's just like look at some of the tech stocks, right?
Yeah.
A lot of tech stocks kind of went underwater during the .com period, and then they didn't pick up until the recent sort of substantially. I mean, look at Google and Nvidia; those stocks kind of had a huge spike in the last very recent 2 to 3 years. Before that, they were pretty much flat or just a little bit on the upside.
Right.
So what is the future?
Well, I think the future is the world becomes more and more decentralized, and we start to see, I think 2019 will be the year where we start to see real use cases and applications. Up until this point, probably everyone in this room doesn't use anything on a day-to-day basis that's really blockchain related.
No.
But
Almost. Tara.
Oh, yeah.
They were like this booking system that is sort of like, and I think I don't know, did they pull out? They just went completely quiet. You can't even book it was like the Grab version that they say it was built on top of the blockchain. And I was super excited. I was like, wow, Uber got squeezed out, and then you go Grab. And then Tara came in, but then like the last 2 months, they haven't heard much. Tried booking with it, couldn't book anything. So I think we're back again at like no daily usage.
Yeah, well, I think 2019 will change that. There are a lot more platforms, and Hedera Hashgraph is one of a few different platforms that are coming up where that will be much faster, and I think you will see a shift. It will be equivalent to moving from a 56K modem dial-up to broadband.
I was just thinking from moving from a Netscape browser to, yeah. And so do you feel that 2019 you feel pretty confident about the common person adopting? Because it's always been it's still a struggle, but as more people are getting a little more comfortable with crypto, actually that's debatable whether they're getting a little, but at least people are now starting to know and be informed.
Right. No, and the truth is at scale, ideally, and even for us as a company, we would want a user to be using an application and not know that Hedera Hashgraph is underneath that.
Absolutely. Yeah. Even AI, like some of the most
right.
successful AI companies, you don't know what is AI. Like Google Translate, for instance. Like you don't know there's any form of AI at the back, or even Alexa, right? Yeah. You don't think that there is AI at the back. But what is interacting with you looks like it's another sort of instant human translator or human being.
Yep.
And what the power for AI isn't about like branding itself as AI, but more like you are sort of the back engine of what make a sim work. And I think that is essentially your point, right? Yep. Does my grandma needs to know blockchain when she wants to do a transaction? Not really. Right. But as long as she is using that successful platform, that is the most important thing.
That's right. And I think this year is when we will start to see some applications that will actually be useful and I will want to use on a daily basis.
Awesome. Cool. And I can't wait to see how. I think the interesting part would be when we do use it more frequently. Let's say in a couple of years time, and people start exploring. What are the differences, and was there really a need? And if there is, why didn't we think about it earlier? How much time have we wasted? Sort of trying to push it aside and avoiding it.
What I'm looking forward to is that things are going to be so efficient. Applications are so efficient, so really evolved that I don't know what that's going to look like, but I'm excited when I imagine that it looks like. I know it's going to feel like, because it's going to feel like, you know what, I'm using this over this, and
and it's going to be fun.
Yeah.
This has been exciting. I could talk whole day about like what are the user cases and how can we do it. You got a problem, come to me. I've got a ton of problems that I could like throw onto your developers to go and solve. But yeah, this has been exciting. Thank you so much, Edgar, for joining us, and I can't wait to bring you again in a couple of months. Yeah.
Thanks for coming back in, and thanks for being on our show, because I've definitely learned a lot.
No, thanks for having me here.
So this is Blockchain Asia and Michelle Wonderland.
And Edgar Seah.
We'll see you next month. After Chinese New Year. So we've got Chinese New Year, and we'll do the recording after Chinese New Year.
We'll do that.
Happy Chinese New Year. Happy New Year's and happy Chinese New Year to everyone.
Happy Year of the Pig.